What's going on, guys? Welcome back to my channel, and today we have 5 wide receivers that you guys must take in your fantasy football drafts if you want to win your leagues this year. But first, make sure you guys go down there and smash that subscribe button because, every subscription helps. Now, I'm going to go ahead and cover 5 wide receivers that I believe you should absolutely take if they drop to you in your upcoming fantasy football drafts, and why we think so. So without further ado, let's get right into the video. Now, up first is a guy that I really think is set to have a really good season this upcoming year, and that's Christian Kirk. This is a team that doesn't have Zay Jones. They don't have Calvin Ridley anymore. They replaced them with Gabe Davis and Brian Thomas, but I don't see them taking too much target share away from Christian Kirk, and here are the reasons why. He was very good versus man coverage when he was playing last year, 48.6% win rate. That's 7th in the NFL. He was 6th in the NFL in fantasy points per target with 2.33. He was wide receiver 19 in fantasy points per game from weeks 2 through 12, which he played. He had 22% target share and 30.5% air yard share over that time period. He was on pace before injury for 130 targets, 90 catches, 1,300 yards. That was going to lead his team by far. He was incredible when he was playing with Lawrence. He was still first in first downs per route run on his team. He was first in yards per route run on his team with 2.31. He's going drafted as the wide receiver 30, average draft position of around 43. This is a guy that's really going to step in. He's been Lawrence's security blanket for so long here. Okay, I don't see him regressing too much, especially if he's able to stay healthy and stay on the field. I find him to be at a really interesting spot because I really do think he's going to be a top 16 receiver and, put back some of the production that he had in 2022. So going at wide receiver 30, you're bound to get a steal, especially with some of the wide receivers that are going before him. Again, I don't want, T. Higgins. I don't want Tank Dell before him. So Christian Kirk, I think, is a really good position that you can grab a wide receiver late and get this kind of production. Up next, I have a guy who I have talked about a couple of times on this channel previously, and I will continue to do so because I really do think he's in a great position to succeed. He had 131 targets last season, 7.7 per game, 28th in first downs per route run. He only had 293 slot snaps. This was 32%. That's down from 60% slot snap rate in 2022. In that time period in 2022, he was number 4 in yards, number 1 in receptions. He just had a new offensive coordinator hired in Liam Cohen. Liam Cohen is the guy that produced Cooper Kupp's major successful seasons in Los Angeles, and he loves big, powerful, physical slot receivers. Chris Godwin has already been poised to go back into the slot, where he has had most of his success throughout his career, and he's being drafted currently as the wide receiver 36 on Underdog at an average draft position of 59, and the wide receiver 39 with an average draft position of 80 on Sleeper. These numbers are absolutely criminal. Chris Godwin might be in the best position this year to succeed with how he's drafted. There are not a ton of guys that were right in front of him that I would rather have over him. I think he is being significantly overlooked, and I think that this season will really show that he can step out and be that number 1, number 2 option in wide receiver. I'm going to continue to grab Chris Godwin. He's the player I've drafted the most over my entire duration of fantasy drafts so far. And I'm going to continue to do so, and I highly recommend you do so, especially at these criminally high draft positions. You're going to get a great player that's going to produce. And up next, we have a guy who is poised to have a breakout season, and I know what everybody's thinking. He's been drafted in the first round. He's going around pick number 10, pick number 11, wide receiver 8. Of course, he's going to get drafted. But I believe he should be drafted ahead of some of these other wide receivers in the first round. And, his numbers speak to that. He had 168 targets last year, 95 receptions, averaged 5.6 receptions per game, good enough for number 13th in the NFL. He's pulled over 300 targets in his first 2 years, the only player in NFL history to ever do that. Number 10 in air yards last year, number 1 in routes run, number 9 in red zone targets, and that's with some super lackluster QB play. He's had the likes of Zach Wilson, Tim Boyle, Trevor Siemian, Chris Streveler. These are not quarterback names that are going to give super massive production to any of their wide receivers. It's super lackluster, and it's proven by his catchable target rate last year. He had 67.9% catchable target rate. That was good enough for 65th in the NFL. He had 992 unrealized air yards, which essentially means that the ball traveled with him as the primary target. These are how many air yards he was targeted at and didn't connect to him. He was good enough for 4th in that category, which is absolutely insane. There's a lot to be left on the table, and he's pushing probably 1,500 yards if they can just get a small chunk of that catchable target rate up. He's currently going as wide receiver 8 on both Underdog and in Sleeper, and he's being drafted in the first round overall. So I would really consider drafting this guy. He is set out to have a really productive year, especially with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback. Aaron Rodgers, when his receivers have had over 130 targets, they are minimum wide receiver 4. He has never had a wide receiver 1 that is lower than wide receiver 4 in fantasy when his receiver has over 130 targets. He's poised to have a great season, and I am all in on the Garrett Wilson train. And up next, we have another guy that's in a similar position to Garrett Wilson, but not as serious, and that's DK Metcalf. And what I mean by that is his catchable target rate last year was horrible, 57.5%. Just about 42.5% of his targets were uncatchable. That's down from 80% in 2022. Despite this, he had 24 red zone targets. That was good enough for number 6 in the NFL, 26 deep targets, good enough for 10th. He has a new offensive coordinator that wants to move him all around the line and get him more opportunities from Washington in Ryan Grubb. And we all know this guy loves to pass the ball. They're going to put out some wide receiver 3 sets. He had the opportunity to be really good last year. He was number 21 in fantasy. Imagine if his catchable target rate was up to 80% like it was in 2022. We're looking at a potential wide receiver 15, top 10 wide receiver finish for DK Metcalf. He's currently going at wide receiver 20, average draft position of 26.7 on Underdog, wide receiver 24 on Sleeper, average draft position of 44.9. Again, this is way too low. I really see him being a top 15, top 16 receiver and establishing himself as kind of that number 1 role. And if this is your second or third wide receiver that you're about to choose, which more than likely it is, this is a great option. DK Metcalf is going to demand a lot more deep targets. He's going to demand a lot of red zone targets. And like I said, if his catchable target rate improves by even just 15 to 20%, then we're looking at a top 15, top 16 receiver season from DK Metcalf, and I don't see it getting any worse than last year, especially with their new vamped offense that's going to pass the ball more. I'm all in on the DK Metcalf train this year, and I think you should be too. And last but not least, we have a guy who once again is going to benefit from better quarterback play, and that is Amari Cooper. Last year, when Cooper was with Watson, Watson was 3rd in passer rating targeting Cooper, 6th in yards per target, 5th in successful play rate together. He had 15 points per game in 4 of the 5 games that Watson had played, and Cooper was doing it really well without Watson as well. He had 2.35 yards per route run. That was good enough for 15th in the NFL, and he was doing it on a 63% catchable target rate. Once again, we see this metric putting up bad stats for really good receivers. He was number 85 in this stat in the NFL. He had 880 unrealized air yards. That's number 10 in the NFL. And he had 1,250 receiving yards. That was also good enough for 10th in the NFL. Think about how good of a season and how good of a fantasy producer he would have been if he had just, say, 10 to 15% higher catchable target rate. He's looking at a 1,400 to 1,500 receiving yard season and being a better producer. He's currently being drafted as wide receiver 29 at an average draft position of 41.3 on Underdog and 29 again in Sleeper with an average draft position of 57.9. I really think Amari Cooper is a great piece to add, just the same as DK Metcalf. He's going a little later, around a little bit before Chris Godwin, and I would still love to have Amari Cooper on my team. He's, I think he's really going to rise up in the draft stock as we get closer to the season, so I would grab him if you're drafting where he's at right now if you can, because if Watson is going to play, I see Watson having a decent season, and I see Amari Cooper benefiting from that because Amari Cooper really, really did not benefit from the lackluster quarterback play that he dealt with for however many weeks that Watson was out. He is going to be phenomenal this year, and I feel as though his draft position is way too low, and that should be your benefit to grab him this year. And that's going to do it for this video. If you guys like this video and you want to see more videos like it, or you want to see me do this with any other position, make sure you smash that like button, comment what you want to see, subscribe if you're new here, and I will catch you guys in the next video. Peace.